is Mark Romney. I'm with University of California, Davis. Welcome to the AURP 2020 International Conference. Today our topic is on international trade and research partnerships. Are they still possible? And what are the impacts of COVID-19? AURP was founded in 1986 as an international nonprofit organization supporting university research partners. I'm honored today to be joined by three guests who have been in the epicenter of international trade and partnerships, who have interesting experiences and perspectives that I hope we'll be able to get to today. First, I'd like to introduce Louis Stewart, who's currently the head of strategic initiatives for developer ecosystem at NVIDIA, and he was a former chief innovation officer for the city of Sacramento. We're also joined by David Carlin, who's vice president of international investment at the World Trade Center in Utah. We're also joined today by Signa Pringle, who is the assistant secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce, where she leads a team of economic development professionals focusing on business attraction, expansion, and retention efforts.
Thank you. And yes, so as Mark mentioned, I'm currently the president of the State International Development Organizations, in short is SIDO, which is really the only national organization focused on supporting all the governors' international trade agendas and presents the state trade agencies. And the main mission really for us and for SIDO is to help these state international development trade agencies to better serve the American exporters by sharing innovative ideas, best practices, resources, and really developing the policies that help small businesses to export. And especially now during the pandemic time, we have gotten quite creative how we deliver the services and how we do help each other. I do want to mention that we, as the state development organizations, SIDO, we are also the leading organization nationally to promote and advocate on behalf of the US SBA's State Trade Expansion Program, which is called the STEP. And some of you might know that states can apply for funding to boost their export and trade programs in each of their respective states. And it's been a very, very effective program over the course of, we just celebrated the 10th anniversary actually last month. So it has really helped the states to provide the necessary tools and resources to their small and medium-sized exporters in their states to take the next step and diversify their sales and markets and take them global. So that's short of the mission that SIDO is here to carry out. So,
thank you very much. David, can you expand a little bit on really the World Trade Center in Utah, its function and purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark. The World Trade Center Utah is an economic development organization here in Utah. We are a private nonprofit organization, and we work very closely with many other partners whom we call Team Utah to help promote the state. Our primary focus, our exclusive focus, I really should say, is international. And so we focus on international trade and attracting international investment, and work very closely with the universities and research parks and other incubators of innovation in the state, thinking that it's going to be very important in the future to attract more capital for the innovation that's here and use the innovation that's here as an asset to attract corporates and startups to come to Utah.
Thank you very much. And Louis, I would love to learn a little bit more about the role of strategic initiatives at NVIDIA.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. Happy to be part of this conversation. As the head of strategic initiatives for the developer ecosystem at NVIDIA, it really is a continuation of some of my work in government. My role now is to build alliances with universities and government to further enhance NVIDIA's standing in technology globally. So it's not just restricted to the U.S., working right now with the UK, working in Germany, working in Africa and South America as well. A lot of that requires work with regulations. A lot of that is working with universities. But my primary focus right now is historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions at NVIDIA. That's a little bit of a departure and a more narrow focus than what I did with the city of Sacramento and the state of California, where the role was primarily citywide and statewide, but really looking at Sacramento's global impact or potential impact and its position in geopolitics, being the capital of the fifth largest economy globally. But a lot of my roles with the state and city were to facilitate partnerships with universities and other government sectors across the U.S. Participated in the STEP program with our international team and Select USA, as well as a lot of manufacturing initiatives with our universities up and down the state, and partnerships with universities and some of my colleagues here state as well.
Thank you very much, Louis. So I thought, maybe we'd start by asking each of you to sort of describe your perception of the international partnerships and trade evolution, I guess, over the last 5 years. What's really changed in the last 5 years? Just sort of set a baseline for appreciating and understanding really the impact of COVID or other influences on over the last year or so. Signe, can we start with you?
Sure, yes, thank you, Mark. It's interesting because, that was during the time when I was leading the state's international investment trade efforts. We were out of the country pretty much, if not twice, 3, 4 times a month as a state agency, taking companies to different trade shows around the world, from different industry representatives. There's so much success stories that we can share from just a year ago, right? But we really saw, which has continued even during the pandemic. When you think about the partnerships and the collaborative or cooperative agreements that we have signed with different countries and different regions within countries, we took the approach already a few years ago that we're gonna focus on the subnational level partnerships and nurture those and create the friendships and have the businesses go back and forth and really, regardless of what happens on a national level, we knew that we're more effective. We see better success stories from our company side, whether it was the FDI attraction efforts or the trade promotion. And fast forward, yes, we had to pivot and figure out ways how we can continue these relationships because it took a lot of effort, a lot of time and energy that went into building these, and it would not make sense to just step back and be letting the pandemic kind of show us the way how we should continue. No, we took the initiative to re-engage with some of these regions and some of the countries that we have developed specifically in life sciences and cyber that are very, very relevant industries right now during the pandemic, and took it more towards the virtual platform like everyone now, right? So we're still able to do the B2B connections, the university-to-university connections. Obviously, would be better in person because that's how relationships are built, but it is what it is and we're making best of it. And just last week we signed our recent collaborative agreement with Quebec in Canada, focusing on life sciences and public health sectors, which is also very relevant right now. But yes, so it was a very fast moving train when it came to building the relationships, sending the companies back and forth, making sure they diversify and they're successful abroad, to a short stop. But again, I think we're being quite creative how to move forward from here.
Thank you so much. Louis, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting listening to Signe's experience because in California, under 2 different governors, so I served under Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown. the policy of traveling to other countries wasn't a thing. So we did not get the opportunity to build the kind of relationships that she is speaking of between business and foreign entities. A little bit with Select USA, but not so much. And I think a lot of the thinking at the time, and it's probably still the same now under this administration, is that there is enough inbound traffic to. Yeah, so it's interesting and what is available in California that we didn't get the chance to do that. So, you know, but we did have Sacramento became a point of interest while I was at the state, because everybody was coming through Sacramento to stop at the governor's office, and being part of the business development office meant that we were part of those international conversations.
Interesting.
A little bit different with the city of Sacramento. We looked at ourselves and our assets like UC Davis, Sac State, and other stuff as true assets in the international conversation. So a lot of the thinking over the past 3 years was to shift that and really put Sacramento in the center of the conversations. And, you know, you and I got to go to China together. We did some other travel together to go visit some places and take people along with us so they can actually see why Sacramento was important around these international conversations. But now with COVID, you know, a lot of that is shut down at the state level just because of the lack of revenue coming in. Traveling to other countries Sacramento. Revenue policy of traveling to other countries wasn't a thing. So, you know, there was a new kind of thought process around international partnerships. We did some stuff with universities specifically, and now with NVIDIA, which is a global company, everything's virtual. So all of our conversations and partnerships just continue to thrive. You know, our CEO, can have 7 different conversations in 7 different parts of the world, and so he's driving business and foreign entities.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree, especially with where Signa and Lewis both ended, which is that we currently have a lot of activity despite the tensions, despite the pandemic. I think the opportunities are certainly virtually, etc. But it certainly hasn't been the end to foreign direct investment attraction or international trade. In terms of just stepping that back, though, for a perspective, I just had a few extra thoughts to share. You mentioned 5 years ago, I was just looking at FDI numbers for the US over the last 5 years, and indeed they are declining. And they're in fact dominated by acquisition as opposed to greenfield. I think a lot of FDI work is more on the, at least from my own personal experience, more about attracting greenfield startups or extent.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Acquisitions really dominated. And one thing that I would have observed is that I think the importance of small and medium enterprises and attracting them and cultivating them through soft landings and so forth it is of growing importance. There's so much competition for the large corporate reloads. I think strategies that focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. And I would also say with respect to the decline of the last 5 years, I look back further, like 20, 25 years, and it's just a very spiky set of numbers. I mean, they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. And I think these are big projects typically that have multi-year kind of germination periods. And so I think it would behoove, it's certainly the strategy we're taking is kind of the long-term view, the slow and steady view of building the relationships and being in it for the long haul, come what may. There will be peaks, there will be troughs, but I think the winner is the person, the group that hangs in there and builds the relationships and over time can gain share and win projects.
Well, I think that's great. And one of the things I found yeah, the relationships are critical. And in our innovation district, two things we're doing. One is having sort of that incubator co-working environment and co-lab environment. For companies, international companies can do a 30 or 60-day market test without signing a long-term lease for some of those companies to expand. And how important relationships are, you can't do research virtually or via Zoom. So a lot of the bench research or life sciences has to be done in a lab, but it's for having that network and connections around the world and making it sort of that one world, one market environment. So.
Yeah, just real quick, I think David hit on a very key thing, and that's the small to medium businesses and looking at that market. I think Aggie Square addresses that a lot, and it kind of, one of the reasons why the partnership between the city and Aggie Square worked for the past 3 years was a conversation around Sacramento becoming a living laboratory and a place where startups and medium businesses can actually come grow and test out their wares and see if it made sense. And so a project like Aggie Square with UC Davis was phenomenal to put Sacramento on the map in the life science area. So I agree 100% with what David said.
And I'm sorry, you just said something which reminded me of a point I wanted to make crystal clear, which is I think if a city or a state or region is competing for small to medium enterprises for soft landings, I think the role of the innovation ecosystem and of the research universities and other incubator type assets in the market are more important than ever. And so I think, for this audience should be recognized as kind of a bullish signal.
100%.
Yeah, and David and Liz, when I can add, we talk about innovation and during this pandemic time, we had started an initiative called Innovate Maryland, where we wanted to really look at some of the very most innovative companies that we have here, whether or not they, came out of one of the military installation labs or university incubators, or they were just really the greatest minds in their garage coming up with great ideas. So it kind of took a stop for a second, March, April timeframe when we were trying to figure out how we're going to approach this whole pandemic thing. But we launched the program and we got so many great applicants or nominations for very innovative companies that we're about to announce in November. But just to showcase that even during these times, hard times, challenging times, innovation still continues. And I think what we've also seen is even increase in the capital, the venture capital and the investments, at least in Maryland in the past quarter, have increased. So it's something that, yes, there's always going to be winners and losers. And during this pandemic time, the same thing. There's companies that really took great advantage of it and naturally grew because of the business demand. But I think innovation and supporting the innovation and entrepreneurship is going to continue no matter what, and it has to be one of our priority focus areas.
Definitely. I did see that really accelerating how companies and academia stood up at the time with the pandemic to address it globally. There was no, barriers in that area because it was one disease or that they were going after. So that was really good. Have you seen any differences between different regions of the world, be it South America, China, Europe, as far as trade relations with the COVID or with partnerships? Has it pretty been universal, or have you guys seen any differences with different regions of the world?
So I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think during my time under the two different governors, even the relationship with China was different because California's policy was to act as essentially a nation state. So a lot of times we weren't necessarily going along with only what the federal government was looking at, right? It was looking at environmental policy differently. It was looking at innovation as a whole differently. So now, if you look at today and kind of today's geopolitical environment, it absolutely has shifted. There's a lot of conversations that are able to still continue with some of the other countries. But a lot of that has stalled because, to Signe's point, a lot of the stuff is in person. So if your government is giving you the signal that it's not okay to talk right now, and you can't travel and you can't do all this other stuff, you know, it does pause a lot of things on the government side, right? On the private sector side, as I said before, there's still a whole lot of conversations happening because business is business. And you know, I'm finding a whole lot more freedoms on the private sector side than I had, you know, before I left public sector.
I mean, I'll just add a few other perspectives to that. I agree. China is probably it's a different story for China than for the rest of the world. For us, it might be a different story for Utah, that is, than for other states. We've had historically a very strong relationship with China, and in fact, I think their efforts to trade with Utah, to buy in Utah, in light of the phase 1 trade deal with China, we saw a rise, an increased focus on trying to find opportunities to buy products from Utah. And that was certainly welcome, but you know, still one we wanted to be careful about in terms of how we played our hand. And I would say with respect to investment, a couple other perspectives on that. One, I think the federal and like Select USA in particular, and the Commerce Department, I really should say, the Commercial Service, has really reached out and tried to help states and economic development organizations across the country market themselves. And if anything, we just found some countries weren't really ready. We leaned into that, but there was some feedback. It wasn't universal, but some feedback of, look, there's just so much going on. This really isn't the best time to be listening to states about you know, possible relocation and foreign investment into the U.S. So that's kind of a mixed message. And then the other thing I would say is just with respect to reshoring, I think there are other shoes to fall there. I do think there is a greater interest than ever, or at least in recent years, in bringing some assets back either onshore or to near shores. And I think with USMCA, I think probably that's going to result in more partnership with Mexico and Canada than ever. But again, I think that's still very much a story to be written.
And David, thank you for mentioning the USMCA, because obviously, you know, there was a little bit of a time period here a few years ago that these trade relations took a little bit of a kind of a pause. Really happy to obviously see from the company standpoint and from all of us that was the USMCA was signed and really took force in July 1st this year. So that was a big step, and I think companies are more obviously confident and have the kind of some of the uncertainty that they were dealing with before put in ease. Well, of course, that was, I guess, before the pre-COVID time or during the pre-COVID time. But now, knowing how Mexico obviously has been hit so hard themselves with the COVID and the pandemic, it will be interesting to see how these relationships, trade and investment side will play out. But on the China side, you know, there was probably, before the trade war started, we had so much interest from both sides, exporters as well as FDI. And then again, it took a little bit of a pause, and we haven't seen obviously this coming back yet. But to my earlier point, what we're doing is we're still encouraging these subnational relationships. We have long-standing relationships with, you know, the Anhui province and with Shanghai, and we have a representative there, and we see the business still wanting to continue. And when the times are improving, hopefully it will. But yeah, I think the relationship building and keeping the friendships are extremely important.
Well, I think we're close to the end of our time, but I'm really grateful to the three of you, you know, Signe, Louis, and David, for spending the time, and I'm sure there'll be some questions that come up. So thank you so much for your time and for your sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Can all of my fellow panelists unmute themselves? Thank you. Louis, David, Signe, thank you all for a great discussion. I wanted to follow up. Mark Romney, who moderated that session, had some scheduled surgery and wasn't able to be here, but we are live now. And if you have questions, please send them through the chat or the function on the AURP website. So this was recorded pre-election. So let's assume we'll have a Biden presidency, a Senate controlled by the Republicans, and a House that has fewer Democrats, somewhat more Republicans, but in that sense may have become a little bit more progressive because some of the more moderate Democrats were beaten by Republicans. What, from an overall trade standpoint, from an overall international relations standpoint, would you say if all of those predictions of what the election is going to look like, how is that going to affect both trade and international relations and research relationships? And I'll start with Louis.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, and happy to be part of this again. I think in the middle of a pandemic, it'd still be a little bit tough, but I think there will be quite a few conversations in the next 6 months to a year that start resuming, especially on the research side. Just because what I foresee is now probably a little bit more deep-throated research happening around solutions to the pandemic. But also then that'll open up other conversations on the research and commercialization side. If we're able to stabilize a few things, but on the trade side, I think we talked about it a little bit. A lot of those things have resumed, especially on the industry side, or have continued on the industry side. And once things settle down post-election, I think states will start those kind of conversations again as well.
David, from Utah's perspective, any comments?
Yeah, I would agree with what Louis said. I mean, a couple other thoughts that come to mind. I think just from a general stimulus perspective, especially if all three bodies, Congress, Senate, and the executive branch are all the same party, I think the size and the confidence in more stimulus to restart the economy and recover from COVID will be greater than ever. We certainly see some of the early stimulus under the Trump administration to be earmarked for innovation and to help economies grow out of the current situation. So I think we would see more of that, and that too could be very helpful for research. And I would also say more of a focus, obviously, on clean energy, and then lots of knock-on effects from that, whether it's rejoining the Paris Accord or just direct funding by the government of helping with grants and research and grants to companies and so forth. Those are two others that come to mind.
And Signe, and from Maryland, and I don't know, Saito takes predictions here, but you can wear either hat.
Yeah. I guess I'll just speak from Maryland side, but I mean, it's not going to be a U-turn right away, right? I think that the issues will remain for time being. I think it probably will be maybe more on a messaging side and maybe injecting some predictability and stability at this point, but we're eager to see what happens on the trade side, but certainly nothing that's going to change overnight. But like all of our international friends and who are probably joining us here today as well, we're all eager to see how this all plays out.
Yes, we had an earlier session about with Fraunhofer, that is Germany's largest applied R&D organization, and so they have a Fraunhofer USA initiative, and Signe knows, the software engineering group is in the University of Maryland Discovery District, but they are now working with the state of South Carolina. They're working and they want to deploy this kind of program across the country with support from different states. So it is rewarding to see we still have research relationships that can benefit, in this case, both the EU and the US. So that was rewarding. So one of the thoughts is, how can individual parks, we have a question from Peter Barrett, a single park or a city or larger geographic region, how can you kind of market your park to an international group? And I'll just bring this up quickly. If you get off at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. area, you see ads for Fairfax County. And I always wonder about international travelers. Do they have any idea where Fairfax County is? Fairfax is spending a lot of money trying to pitch Fairfax County. It would be like me going to Beijing and finding, whatever province Beijing is. Is that relevant to me? So I'm always interested in how internationally, at least in the US, we often have counties marketing themselves internationally. And to be quite honest, is that a good use of marketing assets, or is it better to market it regionally? So any thoughts here on marketing your park internationally?
I could start. I feel that's right up the World Trade Center Utah's alley. We market the state, if you will. When we're abroad, we work with the governor very closely. We basically own his calendar when he's abroad to make sure there's a significant piece of the agenda that's focused on developing commercial opportunities. And as World Trade Center, we're looking at promoting trade as well as investment. In terms of investment, I think I alluded to this in the recorded video. We're absolutely focused on small and medium enterprises, startups, and marketing Utah as a place where innovators, founders should come to grow their business in Utah and basically grow their business in the US. And I think Utah's innovation centers, which certainly includes the University of Utah's Research Park and their rebranded Pivot organization, which is their old tech transfer group, it is a huge asset. They have a new mandate. You may have heard this in other sessions. I'm not sure from Keith or Jonathan, but they have a new mandate to be the single point of contact for commercial interactions with the university, which is very welcome, as well as a mandate just writ large to do economic development. So they're not just about commercializing what's at the U, they're really about now more than ever being a partner to us and in helping attract the kind of investments, the startups and so forth that I mentioned. So, I think I agree with your basic premise that you should do it broadly and not get too narrow, and we're doing that. And I think we have a lot to offer, and I think in particular the research parks. And again, the broader mandates that at least at the U they're taking on is very synergistic and helpful.
And Louis, what about when your experience in Sacramento or in California in general?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to Peter's question. If you when you're trying to elevate a city or a research park to the level of being internationally recognized for innovation, it's important to build the partnerships around you and make sure that everybody is bought in to the vision and the effort. So in Maryland, you work with Signe. If you work in Utah with David, out here we needed to make sure that everybody from the mayor to the Congress people to whoever were in lockstep with the messaging, or else everything just kind of falls apart. And it really doesn't matter how much messaging you do on your own. Your research park, is only as strong as the ecosystem that it's in. So if you're going at it and thinking about an international marketing thing, make sure that if anybody calls any of the partners, that they're saying basically the same thing that you're out there marketing. And then, once you think you've gotten into a place where you're ready to go, start looking at international competitions like Innovision out of Tel Aviv that actually does a global ecosystem competition where you can actually kind of measure yourself against other ecosystems across the world.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Hey, Brian, could I just add on to that a thought?
Sure.
Especially if the question is about marketing and messaging. I'll just say one lesson that I think we've learned and are trying to apply is that the messaging really shouldn't be geographic, as in a university or a city or even a region within a large state, but rather if there's going to be a message, a focused message, that it be about a vertical. We have, for example, Silicon Slopes, which is a broad umbrella for software and technology. And I think we've made great strides as a state raising awareness about that. We're trying to do the same thing now as a state for life sciences, recognizing that it's probably too fragmented for lots of reasons, and that we should all, whether it's the research parks and innovation centers, the companies, the other economic development organizations, et cetera, all work together under one brand. And it's going to be a brand called BioHive that's getting announced by Utah later this month. But it's an example of at least us as a state trying to get the messaging right and doing it, again, by vertical as opposed to by region.
Well, great. That's we look forward to hearing more about that when we're in Utah in October. Signe, same sort of question to you, but I know that there was an interesting international trade mission with, the governor of Virginia, the governor of Maryland, and the mayor that went to Canada, which is, we don't have a lot of experience or in sort of doing things regionally. So that was interesting that I saw that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience doing that regionally?
Yeah, and first I want to agree with Luis and David 100% on the promotional side of it. It's because how we see the universities and research parks, I mean, they're our assets, right? So we're not promoting one city, region. We're going after industry, the ecosystem. Again, they're equally as important as the ports and other infrastructure assets that we have. So that's that. But yes, so beyond just promoting the states as a whole, we realize that there is so much going on in surrounding states, right, and our neighboring states, and if it makes sense, and a lot of times it does make sense because the companies through either cross over the research, the dollars that flow into either the research university, the university research centers, or companies directly from federal agencies. And given that we're so close to the DC here, I mean, it's kind of natural that we need to look at where we all as a region on this East Coast can benefit, and how can we make a stronger voice as a whole. So that was the first effort, not the first, but one of the efforts. Yes, we went to Canada together. Obviously, the two governors and the mayor at the time had their own schedules when it came to attracting the business to the respective jurisdictions. But when it came to speaking with one voice and promoting the area and the assets and how one can benefit from wherever they would locate at the end of the day, even though it is competitive, we all know that, it would still be also giving visibility to the surrounding states and the city, so, and the district. So yeah, I mean, it can be sensitive to go after new business together. But I think the messaging and positioning ourselves as one voice and strong area here is a key.
Great. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our live session. And thank you all for the recorded session as well as the live session. It's been a great conversation. International partnerships remain top mind for most research parks. Science is international, trade is international, and relationships are international. So I want to thank Luis, David, and Signe, especially for taking the time to record and then to come back for this live session. And if you can stay, we're going to do a conversation about how research parks are being disrupted. So all of those of you that are assigned or are willing to engage in this, just go on the website and sign up for one of the sessions that are going on. And then we're going to have a virtual happy hour after that. So with that, thanks to my international friends. David, hope to see you in Salt Lake and Silicon Slopes. I've been to that. That's an amazing event you guys put on there. And Louis, good luck with the new endeavor. And Signe, hope to see you on the road, either internationally or here in Maryland. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.